Welcome, welcome everybody. Just want to thank you for taking the time out to attend this, what I think is going to be a very interesting webinar with our friend Paru from the Raymond James Foundation. The title of this is Live Your Legacy with Cadence. I think that the idea of philanthropy and giving isn't something you do in one thought or at one time. It's something that can frankly exist over a lifetime and beyond. I think that we're going to present a few different ideas here, just to give you some reflection and things to think about. We will be sending out a copy of the presentation to everybody. I know there was a bunch of you that may have to drop off, or some that couldn't attend, or your spouse or friend that couldn't attend. Feel free to let us know and we'll send them copies as well. Anyways, let's get on with the show. So Paru, you're the head of the Raymond James Foundation. You have the lovely job of helping to not only give away money, but really helping people to better their lives and see that work in action. Over to you.
No, thank you. Thanks, Seth, for having me, and thank you everybody for joining. I can imagine after a long weekend on the first day back at work. So thank you for making the time on this lovely Tuesday afternoon. We are going to be speaking about something quite powerful today, and it is truly how to be able to live out with intention, throughout your life, and especially plan for giving at a later time as well. Philanthropy is quite a powerful tool when it comes to wealth planning, so it only makes sense that it is part of the offering here at Raymond James. And I mean, I always didn't start out with this. I think I started my career as a lawyer, and this is me sort of cleaning my karma from those days. And here I am in Canada leading this program here at Raymond James Canada Foundation.
Funny enough, we have a few lawyers who I say are more than giving kind of post legal careers and what they're doing. So you're not alone in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you kind of have to clean your karma a little bit if you've done M&A or some kind of corporate transactional work. It's how you sort of clean your spirit after that, or what you feel like it as cleaning your spirit. But no, thank you, Seth, and thanks to the Cadence Group for having me here today. We're going to be going through quite an interesting sort of agenda, and hope to give you all a well-rounded approach on what the Canadian charitable landscape looks like today. And we're going to be focusing a little bit on philanthropy and the value systems that drive philanthropy. And probably my most favorite part of this agenda is aligning the purpose and intention with impact, and how you can utilize the various types of capital that's available to you, and utilize your influence in all levels of your living in your community and in your networks. And indeed designing a legacy beyond sort of your wealth itself, and how do you touch upon the various facets of your life. Some tax, estate, and cross-border considerations. We won't be going deeply into it, but we'll indeed share the deck, and all of the information and technicalities around that is captured there. So let's dive in. Right. So I'm fairly new to Canada as well. I just moved, coming up to 2 years in July of 2026. So when I moved, for me, it was a big exploration on what the Canadian charitable landscape looks like. Canada is the second largest country in the world, and just like the size of its land, its charitable landscape is also quite massive. There's a total of 86,000 registered charities in Canada. That's because it's coast to coast, and there are lots of small and large organizations in the country doing some of the most important work in society and environment. And this is a quick snapshot from the Giving Report 2025, put together by Canada Helps. It's actually quite an interesting data set, especially because it shows that the amount of people claiming charitable donations in Canada is consistently sort of reducing. So there was 25% of Canadian taxpayers claiming charitable donation tax receipts, tax credits in the 2005 returns. And the latest return set that we can study for 2025 was the 2023 tax filings. And only 16.8% of Canadians have donated to charities as per the 2023 tax filings. Um, this is and it's sort of interesting because obviously we're living in a world of rising prices, also immense amount of immigration that's also contributing to the fact that there's not enough donations being made. But there are various sort of causes that are driving this statistic. But having said that, 12.8 billion is the total amount of giving that Canadians did for charity in 2023. The rest of the data is quite interesting. It's just a sort of, a spectrum of where the charitable activity is actually happening in Canada. So 13% is for environment, another 13% is animal-related charities. That's kind of equal in nature. Some amount of social services, arts and culture, education, and there's a lot of charities that are also doing a lot of international work. And this is also coming out of the immigration that I did sort of allude to earlier. Another interesting data set about the charity sort of landscape in Canada is the fact that 77% of the 86,000 actually make less than 500,000 in revenue per year. So we're talking about really small charities operating in the far reaches of this country. 59% of that 86,000 have no full-time staff. So again, it's quite volunteer run, volunteer driven, and completely run on fundraising dollars. So I think that kind of sets the scene on what the charitable landscape in Canada looks like. And for me, it was quite an exploration sort of coming here and working in social finance in Canada. Moving ahead, just want to shift gears a
Yeah,
little bit. Yeah,
I,
go
li-
ahead.
I like this slide. It's a kind of a definition of wealth that maybe we don't think of right away, but that whole idea of what exactly is wealth? Sure, it's money, it's assets, but it's also knowledge and things like that. And Haru, you and I were talking about that in terms of what it means for yourself. Do you want to maybe elaborate a little bit more?
Absolutely. I think what's really interesting is, and you see this very often as a financial advisor in your whole sort of, book of clients or whatever it may be. At first, people are quite focused on wealth creation, especially in a particular stage in their life, right? It's all about wealth creation, and then it becomes wealth preservation. Like, how am I going to preserve this wealth? How am I going to ensure that I can pass this on to the next generation or utilize it for things that I believe in? And then it becomes about wealth transfer, right? So there's, and I'm sure most people have heard of this intergenerational wealth transfer that we're at the precipice of at the moment. And all of this is also very much pegged by charitable giving because it's a way to transfer capital in different forms to the next generation. So, and what Seth was, I think, was alluding to was the fact of what is wealth? What is capital? Is it just financial capital? Is it social capital? Is it the influence that you have in your, society, in your networks? So it's as you move within the stages of life, I think you just kind of gain not just money as cash itself, but also influence. So affluence really comes with
I
influence.
think I think the next slide actually I kind of chuckle because that sort of represents I think a lot of us and we've been or are thinking about trying to go. Do you want to just jump to the next slide here?
Sure,
Yeah, yeah,
absolutely. And
yeah.
I think this really is the crux of what I do and what I try to sort of encourage in people I meet or clients that I meet and who are trying to think a little bit deeper about their own giving strategy. I'm just going to sort of quickly ask you a question, Seth. When was the first time you ever donated in your life?
I don't remember the first time I donated. What I do definitely recall is over the years being on both ends of the spectrum, whether it be the one-off reactive giving. I don't know if I would call it reactive so much more, somebody's doing a fundraiser, you have some kids selling lemonade, raising money for their soccer team, that kind of stuff. Campaign, obviously, any of you that have been with Cadence for a while, you know that we were very actively involved in the BC Prostate Foundation and the fundraising we did every year. Strategic, again, I think obviously with her wealth, which by the way, I should point out, just got its charitable status. in record amount of time. I think it took us about 9 months to get it. So it's actually the second charity that I've been involved in starting up. And so, yeah, I think over the years, and even today, I still am. Somebody may just hit me up for a donation for something they're involved with, and I'll do that one off. But I think as you're going to get into, I suspect later in this presentation, there's more, I guess, joy in the giving and what have you when it's more strategic because it's not just a one and done type of thing. It's more of a legacy of sorts.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you yourself sort of reflect on how you would have given, it's mostly always reactive in nature, right? Just like the person who just contacted you for a donation, it's always retail fundraising, some kind of a campaign. You're using the SkyTrain and you see a little ad for BC Children's Hospital and you're like, right, I'm going to donate. Or during the holiday season, you're always getting, sent some mail or send some email or somebody's contacting you.
Yeah.
More often than not is always reactive. And I think what's really fantastic is when people start to think a lot more about where their charitable dollars need to go and how their charitable dollars can be pushed towards that sort of advancement of value systems that they believe in personally. And it's really about how can you push that charitable dollar further? And I think that's really where the clincher comes in. We are in quite a high tax regime in Canada. However, the revenue agency also allows for really incentivize charitable giving. So how do you kind of tie the both together to push forward your own personal sort of value systems? And proactive sort of investment also allows for long-term thinking, intentional sort of giving. And I think that's really where it becomes more purposeful rather than
Yeah.
just a reaction.
And I think which it's going to this next slide is great because I think one thing to also remember too that as much as every charity loves to receive monies, sometimes that giving involves time or expertise or just general transfer of knowledge. And going back to the wealth slide, talking about what wealth is, again, there's people that, like I said, obviously money is great to give, but sometimes it's access to another asset of theirs. Maybe it's a property that they have that a kids camp can be built on, or maybe it's some expertise or time. They come from a profession of being a doctor and can lend some time to maybe help out with a certain charity that's associated with a certain health objective or something like that. And I think this latter here it helps to kind of I think uh, uh, put some structure around kind of the path to giving, right?
Yeah.
Where can it start and where can it end?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to sort of add color to what you were just saying, I think it's also about your field of influence because once you reach a certain level of wealth, it's not just your own knowledge and capabilities, but it's also those in your network and how can you sort of match the two when a need arises to you or
Yeah,
somebody contacts you for something. So it's about sort of connecting the dots then and kind of becoming a lot more proactive rather than just reactive. So it's quite an interesting way where you can build out that mosaic of your own giving.
yeah,
And this particular slide really is just the structural version of how one would be giving from a reactive to a proactive sort of situation. The first thing that any of us would have donated is cash, like literally $100 here or $200 there, gotten a
yeah,
little tax receipt for it, and that's it. Um, Property, and by property, it literally is even appreciated securities. And this is when I want to sort of go back to the CRA and the fact that appreciated securities can be donated by eliminating the entirety of the long-term capital gains on it is what I mean by there's incentivization in a high tax regime like
yeah,
Canada. Um, Charitable gift annuity, these are like life insurance things. So it's sort of just like, how do you move ahead in giving by utilizing sort
yeah,
of innovative ways to give? So cash being the simplest and a private foundation being the most complex, requiring the most amount of sort of personal
yeah,
attention. And there's, of course, there are trust structures as well, which fall lag just behind private foundations like a charitable lead trust or a charitable remainder trust. And the donor advised fund is actually quite an interesting one, the one right in the middle there. It's the fastest growing for private philanthropy worldwide. So it's really growing from a momentum perspective. It's everywhere. It's all over North America, Europe, Asia. And it is a sweet middle spot between getting to a private foundation and obviously far more advanced than just giving cash. And we'll dive a little bit deeper into the donor advice fund itself in a few slides.
Yeah, maybe the next slide too, just kind of breaking out that idea of
Yeah.
the one time versus an ongoing uh,
Yeah.
strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as mentioned, the sort of reactive to proactive, and I think that's just what I want to drive home today is those two aspects. Usually, your direct giving, it's a one-time decision. There's no further involvement, and there's no actually like you're not planning for it. It's like it's also sometimes your accountant come, in November, it's like, right, there's a $10,000 tax issue, and we need to sort of mitigate it somehow, and you're just going to cut that check to a particular charity at that time, right? So that's how it kind of works with direct giving. It's really just to sort of solve for a particular issue in a particular period of time. So it's just one time, there is no further involvement, and that's how that works. Strategic plan giving is actually maximizing the impact in the charitable holding. So you're planning your giving, structuring the giving to facilitate some kind of ongoing involvement. So this speaks to like 3 or 5 year gifting strategies where you are giving a certain amount to keep a particular program alive in an organization, or to ensure that certain amount of research funding is being given on an annual basis so that they can get to the end of that research process at a particular hospital foundation. Um, and the strategic plan giving allows for like two major structures, either a private foundation or a donor advised fund. As mentioned, private foundation is like your North Star. Think of it that way. And you would need a certain amount of assets to actually set it up. I would not recommend a private foundation structure personally without at least 30 to 50 million. That's what I would sort of call it at. And the other aspect is there's a fair amount of administrative and regulatory compliance that one would have to do. And indeed, mind share, hiring of resources, so accounting, actual programmatic people, lawyers are going to be working on this 24/7 and ensuring that the charitable objects are being completely met. And the other structure is a donor advised fund, which does not have any of the administrative or regulatory aspect. It's really just a structure to hold charitable monies. Think of it like a philanthropic account where you have some amount of money is put there, which is then meant for actual gifting to charities. And indeed, the ability to create a legacy beyond one's lifetime. As sort of going back to that high tax regime in Canada, your biggest tax bill as a Canadian is at the time of death. They call it the terminal tax return. And in the Income Tax Act, they speak to the fact that death is a tax event. So again, alluding to the high tax regime in Canada, but how do you strategically plan for that tax event that is going to trigger at the time of
Yeah.
death? Yeah, and
So
indeed, yeah,
so maybe now that we kind of have a bit of a layout of the scene here in Canada when it comes to charitable giving, this difference between one time versus ongoing. Maybe we jump to the next slide here,
absolutely.
because it's kind of like, what's the road? What's the road that we need to be thinking about being on? So myself and Peru didn't necessarily come up with the exact copy that you see on here. This actually came from a book that's called "Legacies Aren't Just for Dead People," and it's a book that I read some time ago on giving. Um, and the whole idea behind this is there's a lot of different ways to leave a legacy, right? This idea that you donate a whole bunch of money to some or create a private foundation, donate a bunch of money, and you have the J. Robert R. Smith III Foundation that 200 years from now is giving money to some function that people don't even know who that is, let alone what the whole purpose of the original foundation was. This is something that it really resonates with me, Paru, because I think what it speaks to is that while we're alive, there's so many things that we can do from a legacy giving standpoint. and this kind of breaks this down, going back to, one of your earlier slides, talking about wealth and what does that mean, right? Whether it be, monetary or, community wealth or things like that. And I think that these are just some examples of various legacies ones could set up. And, we're going to get into more specific ones that are a little bit more monetary driven. Paru, you're going to go over that, but I'll just show you the book again for anybody that maybe wants to pick it up. So it's a fun book, an easy book to read, but I think that having read through it, I think that it tells you that anybody can be charitable and anybody can create a legacy, regardless of their particular financial net worth or their standing in the community and those sorts of things. I think you can start it when you're a young teenager to a very senior adult. So
No, absolutely. And I think volunteering is really where mostly first donations are done, is where you volunteer time. So it's quite interesting how people sort of get into their intention and what their purpose is, right? So it's quite beautiful, actually. And right segue to kind of talk about what Cadence is doing in its community. And
yeah, so I kind of chuckle at this because this is our former legacy building with Cadence. I think that when I look at these different pictures, yeah, some are checks being written, and some are just volunteering time. The one on the top left was volunteering time teaching teachers at a local high school about finances and saving and what have you. To the bottom left-hand corner was a funny thing. When we did the Her Wealth Summit, we had asked for donations for swag bags and stuff, and Que Paso were very generous to give us bags of chips, but they gave us these massive bags. It didn't quite work with giving somebody a big bag of chips to walk around with at a conference. So we actually ended up redonating that to a local charity. And then and of course, down the right hand corner was a Her Wealth Society, that all day event that we did last fall, which again we're doing again this fall. Up the top right hand corner, talk about legacies. There's somebody that we know who was a lawyer previously, who retired and became an artist, and actually donates half of her proceeds from all the art that she sells to various charities. And so, there's an example of legacy making an action. You're not only doing the work and doing something you enjoy, but you're also, helping, it to benefit charities at the same time. So anyways, that's
wow,
us. That's us in the last little bit. Yeah, we've been a little bit busy.
yeah, it's actually so wonderful. And right now we're in our Raymond James May Cares month. So
That's right.
across the continent, in the US and in Canada, we are all out in communities doing volunteering our time. So teams are getting together and volunteering time at soup kitchens to local food banks to all types of charities. And it's actually so wonderful to sort of be part of an organization that allows you time to sort of, get out there in community. And
Yeah.
Cadence, a lot of what Cadence does is also, I would say, part of that as well. Like I think the photo of you doing your little walk around there. So that's also quite cool.
So enough talking about us and Cadence. Paru, tell us what your day job is at the Raymond James Foundation. And by the way, we'll send out copies of this little barcode. It will take you to the website and what have you if you want to get more information. But Paru, do you want to maybe talk a little bit about the Raymond James Foundation and a
Uh,
specific area of charitable giving?
yeah, absolutely. So the Raymond James Canada Foundation was originally actually set up in 2012 to steward the employee giving and our volunteer efforts, as mentioned, across the country. We are obviously across the country, Halifax to Victoria, and the idea was to sort of give back to the communities that we are present in. The foundation also was set up to enable strategic philanthropy for our clientele that required some kind of planning for their own charitable giving. And what is it that we are trying to do with clients here? Because obviously, every client can just donate to whichever charities that, are close to them, that they resonate with. The idea is just to simplify the giving, right? And how do you simplify the giving is through our program called the Charitable Giving Program. Now, the Charitable Giving Program is just our product name. It's actually a donor advised fund program, as mentioned, the fastest growing vehicle for philanthropy in the world at the moment. And our product name is just Charitable Giving Fund. Jumping straight into it, it's essentially like a philanthropic investment vehicle. Whoops, I don't know how it happened there, but it's just a philanthropic investment vehicle for holding your charitable dollars. Now, this is actually where it gets quite interesting, and I've mentioned the high tax regime of Canada a couple of times, but it's the fact that you can donate appreciated securities and receive a tax credit for all of your gains as well is really where the clincher is. So you as the donor, you donate, tax receipt is issued for the total fair market value of your donated securities or cash or whatever it might be. So if it's 100 Apple shares worth a certain amount of money and you bought it for $10 back in the day, the total amount that you donated for is what you're getting a tax receipt for. And then you set up a charitable giving fund. Now, this is where it actually starts to behave like a foundation, where a private foundation, you would be naming your own foundation, you would be setting up the board for your foundation, and a lot more administrative work. But here you get to name your own charitable giving fund, and it is held there. These are irrevocable assets, of course, gifts that are made to the Raymond James Canada Foundation to be held within your charitable giving fund to grow under the aegis of your financial advisor, so Seth in this case. And it continues to grow. That's what I meant by pushing your charitable dollar further. So if you donated, $100,000 directly to a particular charity, that's a one-time decision, that's done. It's no longer, you're not involved in it anymore. You put the $100,000 into a charitable giving fund, it continues to grow there, tax-free, for your further charitable granting as and when you desire. So it continues to grow there, and then grants can be issued to registered charities across Canada or internationally. We also help steward international granting for our clients through our intermediary partner, and I can get into that a little bit later. The interesting thing about creating your own charitable giving fund is that like mentioned, no administrative or regulatory stuff that you'd have to do with a private foundation. You can grant it out as and when you please. It's an amazing tool to sort of get your family involved in decision making of where this money needs to go into registered charities. And if you don't actually have a traditional family structure, it's also an amazing way to ensure that your wealth is being utilized for stuff that you believe in, right? Charities that you believe in, or organizations and work that you believe in. The foundation actually has been growing a fair bit, and we issued $15 million worth of grants in 2025. Just a quick note of nomenclature difference here. A donation is what you get a tax receipt for. So assets or monies that's put into your charitable giving fund is a donation. What you then give to registered charities is a grant. So just a difference in nomenclature there as I go into
Do you want to
further.
maybe go over the kind of
Yeah.
the breakdown? Because I know you
Yeah.
have grant, grow, and give,
Yeah,
and
exactly. So
it might be a little bit easier.
yeah, when I go into this, I just want to sort of make it a bit clear that that's the differentiation in nomenclature. So it's a give, grow, grant model. So how do you set up a charitable giving fund? You give an initial 100,000 donation, and you can of course donate cash, liquid securities, certain insurance products that are also acceptable. The tax receipt that you utilize can be utilized for the next 5 years. So that's where it becomes quite effective, especially if you've got an impending tax event, such as sale of a business, sale of a secondary property. These are all sort of tax triggers in Canada. So how do you utilize your philanthropic giving in your larger overall sort of financial planning is the question. Indeed, subsequent donations can be made at, increments of 10,000 or more, and your charitable giving fund, CGF for short, can be also a residual beneficiary in your estate or a recipient of a bequest in your will, so that you can plan for some kind of estate tax planning strategy as well, utilizing this vehicle. Continues to grow under the aegis of your financial advisor, like I mentioned. And the focus is some kind of long-term capital appreciation with the goal of increasing your initial gift through prudent investing for further granting out to charities. So you have the freedom to grant out to charities. You have the opportunity to grow this money that would go to charities in a manner where you can then grant out more to charities than you originally intended through this sort of investment option. Um,
Yeah,
also allow, yeah,
and sorry, one thing I was just going to mention too, in the appendix, we have more details about the tax and estate, planning side of this, in terms of, well, it's not just this, it's any kind of giving, but
yeah,
it would include this as well.
absolutely. And in the website, which is on that barcode, there's also a donation calculator that you can utilize to see, what would be your sort of benefits if you are donating a certain amount, depending on the province you're in, etc. So we also have that sort of calculator live on the website. What are the benefits of a charitable giving fund, right? So it's quite cost effective in comparison to most sort of other private foundation structures that you would have. Is a 1% administrative fee that covers all of your legal, tax, administrative aspects. Completely confidential. That's if you choose to be confidential. Most donors do want to be recognized, but some want to be, do want to remain anonymous depending on, what it is that they're giving towards. It's also a fantastic way to honor somebody or something in your life. Last year we had, in fact, a donor lose a cat, and a lot of the grants actually went out in the honor of Tuna the cat. We had about 10 grants got nationwide in honor of Tuna the cat, and it was quite wonderful. As mentioned, completely customizable, so you can personalize the name of your charitable giving fund. We have some really creative names in our roster. As long as we don't have the same name, we can go for it. Super flexible. It's not, there's no endowment in our model, and that's a specific structure where assets are held for the long term uh, continuity of the particular foundation. We don't have an endowment model. So say Seth leaves Raymond James Canada Foundation, Raymond James, and goes to another firm, and they do have a donor advised fund offering. The assets can move with Seth to that new entity with the new donor advised fund offering, as long as the original donor is still alive. Quite simple. We do have a fantastic team, and we're able to sort of set this up quite quickly. Strategic. This really is fantastic, especially in light of impending tax events, as mentioned, sale of a business, sale of a secondary property. Um, Legacy building, indeed continue to sort of recommend grants and also set up a letter of wishes so that we can continue to issue grants after your passing, or have successor advisors in a multi-generational family where you are involving the next generation to continue to recommend on the account to ensure that grants are going out into charities after your time. We also have the option to sort of set up a fundraising portal. That's actually quite cool, especially where if you are really, in line and active with a particular organization, or want to fundraise for a particular cause, we can set up this type of website for you, which allows you to sort of fundraise using credit cards, and the tax receipts are issued immediately, and then the monies can be and a lot of donors use it for like, all right, we want to try and raise 50,000, then we would match 50,000, and then 100,000 grant is given to a particular charity of what they're fundraising for. As mentioned, we can receive donations of all types, so cash, securities in kind, insurance, testamentary, that's through the will. And I think it sort of just is super beneficial in a sweet middle spot in between a private foundation or any other trust structure, and allows you a lot of flexibility to utilize it and have fun with it, I think, when you've reached a certain level of affluence. Um, and I think
Well,
sort of alluding to the fact that you don't have to be sort of, towards the end of your life
yeah,
stages to think about
I no,
that.
I think that I think this is a good, you in terms of just if you want to go beyond just the one-off giving and have something a little bit more ongoing, that again you can enjoy the giving in your lifetime or even post, and you can bring other people into that process as well, which I think is good. Just keep an eye on the time here before we wrap things up. We'll come back to this, but do you want to just show the appendix slides just quickly, just for people to? So keep going. Yeah, yeah. So right here, just we have some. Whoops, go back for a second. Go back.
So the appendix has
Next
all
slide. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I know I don't have control of it, but yeah, next slide. Yeah. Yeah, just in terms of, oops. Okay, well, anyways, as you can see, there's a bunch of slides on whether you give tax giving yourself specifically or you do it corporately. Obviously, giving corporately can be very beneficial, particularly those that have a lot of money tied up in their corporation. The tax benefit is actually quite a bit greater. There's also cross-border considerations. When it comes to giving, different rules in the States versus Canada. But again, I think that one of the nice things actually, Peru, which you didn't bring up, is for people that do have U.S. in situ assets or presence. Raymond James USA also has their own foundation set up, which something similar can be done. And I think on the estate planning side, again, everybody's details are a little bit different. We just try to kind of summarize at a high level some of the things that can be kind of be thinking about when it comes to more strategic giving or estate planning. So I guess we go back to Rob Lucy's quote there just to wrap
Absolutely.
this all up. Yeah, so I think again the key takeaway here, comes from that book that I showed everybody earlier, and that's that legacies aren't just for dead people. Um, and I think that the one thing if you can take away to reflect on today is, how do you start your own legacy in some way, or you're giving in some way. And again, um, giving money, getting tax benefits from it obviously is one way. But listen, there's volunteering, there's sharing of wealth, certain wealth that you have, whether it be physical assets or financial assets. There's also sharing of your own knowledge. I mean, there's a lot of people that are at or near retirement that have a lifetime wealth of knowledge that they can either help out a certain organization. You think about Big Sisters, for example. There's an perfect example of creating a legacy where you're working with young women, and acting as a mentor. And what are you doing? You're passing on a lifetime of your own experiences and things like that to hopefully have this young, well, they're not adults always, they're children, take something away from that. And again, there's another way to create a legacy. So on that note, I think, Paru, any kind of last thoughts or comments that you?
No, and I think you've sort of very beautifully wrapped it up that it's not just about, giving money. It's also just about, I think, thinking about what your intentions are and just sort of finding that little purpose within you and distilling it. And then, okay, it's time for now. And then it's some amount of capital, and it can be social or financial or whatever it may be. So it's just about thinking in that manner and helping sort of align those thought processes.
Show
So
this book again here.
hmm
I know. Again, I know not everybody was able to see it with the whole time. Some people just popped on. We will be sending out a copy of the presentation. We'll also have it on a YouTube link, so it'll be easy to share with your friends. I do. This is definitely one I don't normally suggest to people to actively share a webinar that we do, but I think this one is definitely worth sharing because hopefully, if we can just get a few more people into the legacy building mode, you know, makes Canada, Vancouver, the world an even better place than what it already is.
Absolutely. No, thank
Okay.
you.
All
Thank you
right.
all for
Thank you, Paru.
attending. Yeah, and thank you, Seth, for
All right.
having me.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for attending.